Imagine for a second that you are a 19th century secular skeptic.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right, so you have just spent years studying philosophy, and you feel like you've successfully used cold, hard logic to completely deconstruct the Christian faith.
You've won the debate.
Exactly. You've proven to yourself the whole thing is just a myth. But instead of, celebrating this massive intellectual triumph, you sit down and you weep.
Wow.
Yeah, you weep because, as one prominent skeptic actually confessed to the preacher, Charles Spurgeon, in tearing down this faith, you've just destroyed what he called an excellently comforting delusion.
That is such a heavy admission.
It really is.
Yeah.
Welcome to Reformed Thinking. Today we are diving into a monumental sermon delivered by Charles H. Spurgeon on March 11th, 1855 at Exeter Hall in London.
And we're going to look at how he uses that exact vulnerability, right, in the secular worldview to open up a really profound mystery about human suffering.
Because that opening hook by Spurgeon, it's brilliant.
Oh, it's incredible. It completely exposes the existential dread that's hiding just beneath the surface of a purely secular, materialistic worldview.
Right.
He's pointing out that if this biblical text he's preaching on, which is 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 5, if it isn't true, we really should be weeping.
Because what's the alternative?
Exactly. If we are just biological accidents hurtling through a cold, indifferent universe and our suffering has no transcendent meaning whatsoever, then as Spurgeon argues, we have every right to just let our bodies waste away in a perpetual tear.
Just nonstop grief.
Right. We might as well ask the clouds to rest on our heads and rivers to roll down from our eyes. The skeptic realizes that without a sovereign hand guiding the pain, the universe is just a meat grinder.
Which perfectly sets the stakes for this entire conversation. Okay, let's unpack this because we are looking at a very specific paradox today.
A really difficult one for modern ears, honestly.
For sure. It's about how spiritual suffering and divine consolation increase in exact proportion to one another.
Which is wild.
It is. And Spurgeon delivers this not as some, abstract philosophy, but to a massive packed crowd at Exeter Hall.
A crowd of regular people dealing with the very real grit, disease, and honestly, the crushing poverty of Victorian London.
Right, so before he can offer them the comfort of this divine proportion, he has to do something destructive.
He has to clear the deck.
Yeah, he has to completely shatter the false advertising that a life of faith is supposed to be easy or, materially prosperous.
He takes direct aim at what we would modernly call the prosperity gospel, though he uses a metaphor that is just perfectly suited for 1855.
Recruiting sergeant.
Yes, the worldly recruiting sergeant. So in those days, a military recruiting sergeant would go into the pubs, find an ignorant, impressionable youth, slip a silver shilling into his hand, and just paint this absolutely glorious, entirely fictional picture of military life.
Right. He tells the kid, Her Majesty's service is a fine thing.
Exactly. You'll have nothing to do but walk about in flaming colors. There's no hard service.
Just put on the uniform and march straight to glory.
Right, which is a complete lie designed just to get a signature on the dotted line.
And Spurgeon argues that religion is far too often presented in this exact same deceptive way.
People are promised constant health, completely resolved relationships, and smooth sailing if they just walk down an aisle or say a quick prayer.
But Spurgeon introduces the Christian sergeant, who operates entirely differently.
Very differently.
When he enlists a soldier of the cross, he looks the recruit in the eye and tells the absolute unvarnished truth. He echoes Christ's command to count the cost.
The true sergeant says, you must be prepared for hard battle. You aren't getting a feather bed here.
No luxury chariots to heaven.
No. You're going to have to climb steep mountains, ford freezing rivers, slay giants, and bear immense, immense trials.
Which creates a really fascinating theological tension. Because Spurgeon is not denying the goodness of God.
No, not at all.
He is trying to recalibrate our definition of what goodness actually feels like on the ground.
He's stripping away that entitlement, that voice that says, I am a person of faith, therefore the universe owes me a frictionless existence.
Right.
He's telling you that if you enlist, the battlefield is the guarantee.
I have to pause you here, though, because I can hear a listener mentally pushing back on this.
Sure.
Because if we look at the broader biblical text, there are places, like in Proverbs, that explicitly say wisdom's ways are ways of pleasantness.
Yeah.
And all her paths are peace.
Yeah, that's a famous text.
So how does Spurgeon, or any of us for that matter, reconcile the promise of pleasantness with, fighting dragons and walking on rough, thorny roads. It really feels like a contradiction.
It does feel like a contradiction until you look at the actual mechanism of why it is pleasant.
Okay.
Spurgeon explains the road itself is objectively rough. The terrain is steep, the thorns are sharp, the dangers are completely lethal. It is not a pleasant road.
It's objectively miserable.
Exactly. It's only pleasant because of the company. The joy isn't found in the absence of the thorns. The pleasantness is entirely located in the presence of the beloved Christ himself, who walks with you through that thorny wilderness.
So the companionship overrides the topography.
Perfectly said. Yes.
So the geography of your life might be a totally desolate wasteland, but your immediate proximity to the Savior changes your internal reality.
Right.
That makes sense. But Spurgeon doesn't just leave suffering as this vague, abstract idea of being on a rough road.
No, he gets very specific.
Very specific. He breaks down the actual mechanics of why this trouble is mathematically guaranteed. He gives this 360-degree tour of inevitability.
Telling you to look in 4 distinct directions to understand exactly where the incoming fire is coming from.
And he begins with what I think is the most counterintuitive direction of all.
Oh, absolutely. He doesn't start with the devil or the world. He starts by telling you to look upward.
Right.
And when you look upward, you see God, who is perfectly pure, holy, and spotless.
And the theological reality, the actual destiny for the believer, is that they're being conformed to that exact image.
But how does an impure, deeply flawed human being become like a perfect God? It requires what Spurgeon calls furnace work.
Which is not a gentle process.
Yeah.
He uses the imagery of being broken with a pestle in a mortar.
Yeah.
Which is a violent metaphor. You don't just magically become perfectly pure overnight.
No, you really don't.
Spurgeon compares the bright spirits in heaven to Pyrenean marble. And for those who don't know, Pyrenean marble was the purest, whitest, most flawless stone used by the ancient Greeks for their absolute greatest sculptures.
It's beautiful, but to get there, it requires relentless, agonizing blows from a chisel to actually take shape.
Right. It's not just taking a warm bath. It's undergoing structural demolition.
And he contrasts that necessary chiseling with our modern desire for constant tampering.
We love our comforts.
You do. He asks a really piercing question. He says, do you think you can ride to heaven wrapped in fine furs and ermine while the glorious hosts of the martyrs had to swim through seas of blood to get there? Wow.
Right. The early saints were consumed in fire, slain by the sword, destitute, afflicted. Spurgeon is essentially asking, who do you think you are?
Yeah, why do you get a pass?
Exactly. If the martyrs had to endure the chisel to be conformed to Christ, why do you expect to reign without a battle?
It is just a devastating critique of modern comfort. We want the Pyrenean marble outcome.
Right.
But without the pestle and mortar process.
We want the shortcut.
So looking upward, our own sanctification guarantees suffering. Then he tells us to look downward.
And the imagery here shifts radically. It goes from the sculptor's studio to this epic, almost cinematic war room.
He directs our attention to the foes beneath our feet, hell and its forces.
And Spurgeon paints this vivid scene of what happens in the spiritual realm the very moment a person is genuinely converted.
He says that Satan, realizing he has just lost a subject, spreads his bat-like wings and flies down into the abyss to summon his counselors.
The language is practically Miltonic.
Totally. Satan addresses the sons of the pit and declares that a traitor has defected to the Lord of hosts. Because he used to own this person.
Right. This person used to be a loyal liege servant of Apollyon.
Which is a great reference to the destroyer from John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress.
Yes, but now they've crossed the border. And because Satan can no longer drag this soul to hell to bind them in chains forever, he commands his series to do the next best thing.
He tells them to plague the believer on earth. Let hell dogs bark at him, besiege him, harass him to the death.
Let the fumes of our corrupt and burning lake ever rise in his nostrils.
That is the exact phrase Spurgeon uses, yeah. The realization here is that you are fundamentally residing in a war zone because you changed your citizenship.
You're an expat in enemy territory now.
You are no longer native to the domain of darkness, so of course the enemy is furious.
If you look downward, trouble is just inevitable because you are actively being hunted by an adversary acting like a roaring lion.
Which leads perfectly into the third direction.
Look around.
Yes. Because you aren't just facing invisible spiritual attacks from below, you are walking through a physical, deeply hostile environment right now.
Spurgeon warns the listener not to fall asleep because we are marching through enemy country.
And he unpacks this terrifying sociological ratio.
Oh, this part is sobering.
He says that for every one sincere person you meet who will encourage you toward heaven, you will find 20 hypocrites or hostile actors who would push you down.
1 to 20. That is a rough ratio.
It's a very sobering assessment of human nature and society. He's reminding his audience of the biblical principle that friendship with the world is hostility toward God.
Society is not neutral.
No. He uses the analogy of a rattlesnake's nest. A traveler sees this nest and notices the dazzling, iridescent hues of the sleeping serpents.
So this is beautiful.
It looks alluring. It looks completely safe. So they put their hand in, and they are immediately bitten.
We do this constantly, don't we? We look at the dazzling hues of modern culture, the wealth, the status, the entertainment, and we think, oh, this is safe. I can play with this.
But the world is fundamentally structured in opposition to the truth. Spurgeon says that when you sleep, you are sleeping on a battlefield.
When you walk, you must assume there is an ambush in every single hedge.
The world will cancel you, mock you, or seduce you, but it will never, ever help you become holy.
So we have the chisel of God from above, the fury of hell from below, and the ambush of the world around us.
But it is the fourth direction that is perhaps the most profound theological insight of the whole sermon.
Look within.
Yes.
This one changes absolutely everything.
It really does.
Spurgeon tells a story about a Roman citizen who publicly wished he had a window installed in his chest so that everyone could see the pure motives of his heart.
And Spurgeon, with his classic dry wit, says he is incredibly glad he does not have a window in his heart.
Right. In fact, he says if he did, he would keep the shutters up as tightly closed as Apsley House.
And we definitely need to explain that reference because it would have been immediately obvious to a Londoner in 1855, but not to us today.
Please do.
So Apsley House was the famous London residence of the Duke of Wellington. And during a period of really intense political unrest, rioters came and smashed the Duke's windows. Okay.
In response, Wellington installed massive, bulletproof iron shutters to protect his home from the mob outside.
But Spurgeon flips the imagery.
He does. He says our hearts require bulletproof iron shutters not to keep the mob out, but to hide the riot that is happening inside.
Man, what a brilliant corrective to the modern mantra of, just follow your heart or live your truth.
Right, because we are constantly told by modern psychology and media that our inner voice is inherently pure and it's always guiding us toward our best selves.
But Spurgeon is calling the human heart a ticking time bomb.
Exactly.
It's like carrying a loaded, unsecured firearm in your pocket, forgetting the safety is off and going for a jog. You are an absolute danger to yourself.
It is the doctrine of original sin. Spurgeon says the human heart is a cancer in the vitals. It is a coiled-up viper ready to sting.
Even if there were no devil to tempt you from below.
Right, and no hostile world to seduce you from around, you would still be your own worst enemy. The corruption is native to our own biology. So, synthesizing all four directions here, you literally cannot escape trouble.
Nowhere to hide.
You are being purified from above, hunted from below, ambushed from around, and betrayed from within. Suffering isn't some anomaly. It is the fundamental baseline of the human condition.
And that is a very heavy baseline to establish.
It is.
But it is entirely necessary for the pivot Spurgeon makes next. Because if suffering is inevitable from all four directions, the listener might logically but incorrectly assume that all their daily miseries are somehow holy or sanctifying.
Right. They might think, well, I'm miserable today, therefore I must be incredibly spiritual.
Exactly. And Spurgeon has to violently correct this assumption.
And I actually have to push back on Spurgeon here, or at least play devil's advocate for a second, because he gets incredibly harsh in this next section.
He doesn't pull his punches.
No, he talks about the whining sufferer.
Right.
He describes people who come to him complaining, saying, I know I am a child of God because I am in debt or because I'm in poverty or because people avoid me.
And Spurgeon essentially snaps back.
He does. He says, I know a lot of rascals in the same condition. It serves you right.
Yeah.
In our modern culture, where we are highly attuned to systemic inequalities and mental health struggles, telling someone who is socially isolated that it serves them right. I mean, it sounds arrogant and cruel.
Mm-hmm.
Is he really saying that our everyday human anxieties don't matter to God?
It definitely grates against our modern sensibilities, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But we have to look closely at the theological distinction he's making here.
Okay.
He isn't saying that God lacks empathy for human pain. I mean, the Psalms are full of God binding up the brokenhearted.
Sure.
What Spurgeon is targeting here is a specific spiritual entitlement. The idea that all misery is automatically a badge of righteousness.
Ah, I see.
He's addressing the person who makes terrible, unethical financial choices, ruins their own credit, and then claims they are bearing a cross for Jesus when the bank forecloses.
Or, the person who is just a genuine jerk. They are abrasive, unkind, arrogant, and when people naturally stop inviting them to dinner, they claim they're being persecuted for righteousness' sake.
Exactly. Spurgeon says, persecuted? Not at all. You are just insincere and cowardly, and men hiss at you.
So the insight here is really vital.
Suffering as a direct consequence of your own foolishness, your own sin, or your own toxic personality earns absolutely zero divine consolation.
You don't get the comfort of a martyr if the wound is entirely self-inflicted.
Right. It only triggers the divine mechanism of comfort if it is suffering for the sake of the truth.
Okay, that clarifies it. It's really about causality.
Yes.
But he uses a phrase to describe this legitimate suffering that I really want to dig into because it's strange. He says that when we suffer for the truth, our afflictions are actually the sufferings of Christ's mystical body.
Right?
What does that mean mechanically? Like, how can my daily trial in a modern office building be considered the suffering of an ascended Christ?
Well, it's rooted deeply in the Apostle Paul's theology of union with Christ.
Okay.
Spurgeon breaks it down with a highly surreal, almost towering visual. He says, imagine a man who is so immensely tall that his head is in heaven, piercing the clouds, but his feet are planted firmly at the bottom of the sea on earth.
That is quite the image.
Even though the distance between the head and the feet is vast, it is still one single biologically connected body.
So the feet represent us, the believers navigating the grit and freezing water of the world.
Yes. And the head represents Christ in glory.
Got it.
And the mechanism of a body means that when the feet are standing in freezing, icy water, the head feels the exact pain of that freezing water.
Because the central nervous system connects them.
Exactly. The central nervous system of grace connects them. So when you are slandered for holding fast to your faith, or when you endure a trial purely out of obedience to God, it is not just your isolated trial.
Christ actually feels it.
Yes, it is as much the suffering of Christ as the agonies of Calvary were.
That completely ennobles our suffering. It really removes the isolation. If I am suffering for the truth, I'm not suffering alone in a vacuum. I am participating in a cosmic reality.
And Spurgeon illustrates the power of this with a really great military analogy.
Oh, I love this part.
He tells the story of a great commander who leads his troops into a narrow valley, and they wake up to find themselves completely surrounded by a massive, overwhelming enemy force.
The night before the battle, the commander walks through the camp to gauge the morale of his men.
Right. And he stands outside a tent and overhears a dispirited, terrified soldier doing the math.
The soldier is counting up the enemy's infantry, their artillery, their cavalry, and comparing it to their own small numbers.
And the math is hopeless. They're going to be slaughtered.
But the soldier has forgotten a crucial variable in his equation.
He has. The commander pulls back the flap of the tent, looks the soldier in the eye, and asks one profound question.
How many do you count me for?
You've counted the enemy, and you've counted your peers, but what mathematical weight do you assign to me, the captain who has never lost a battle?
And Spurgeon applies this directly to the listener's anxiety.
Yes. When you are looking at your medical diagnosis, your financial ruin, or the cultural hostility surrounding you, how many do you count Christ for?
You cannot just count him as one extra soldier. You can't even count him as 1,000.
No, he is the infinite variable. He is the chief among 10,000. When you factor Christ into the equation, the scale completely tips.
Which brings us to the core promise of this text. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Let's do it.
If suffering is guaranteed, and we establish that we are suffering for the right reasons as part of Christ's body, how does the comfort actually arrive?
Right, the mechanics of it.
Yeah, I'm struggling with the physics of this. How does immense pain logically equal immense joy? Spurgeon introduces the concept of God's pair of scales, what he calls the mathematics of mercy.
He argues that God manages the universe with a precise pair of scales. On one side, he places his people's trials. On the other side, he places their consolations.
And the divine math is flawless. When the scale of trial is light and nearly empty, the scale of consolation is equally light.
But when the scale of trial is incredibly heavy, piled high with grief and agony, you will find the scale of consolation drops with the exact same immense weight.
He makes a point to note that this is purely a matter of lived experience. If you haven't been regenerated, if you don't have the Holy Spirit, This math sounds like absolute nonsense.
Totally. A secular psychologist cannot understand how the blackest external clouds can produce the brightest internal light in a person. It completely defies logic.
So Spurgeon spends significant time explaining the actual mechanisms of how this works.
Why does God use suffering to deliver comfort?
Exactly. He gives three specific reasons. Let's look at the first mechanism,
Making room.
making room. Think of the human heart as a reservoir.
Right. And Spurgeon observes that, generally speaking, little troubles make little miserable people.
People whose hearts are the size of a grain of mustard seed, who have no real sympathy for others, who never weep for their fellow man, who are entirely self-absorbed.
Those are usually people who have never experienced deep, soul-crushing woes of their own.
Right, because great capacity is only carved out by great trouble.
By default, our reservoirs are filled with our own stuff.
Oh, yeah. They are filled with our self-reliance, our 401ks, our comfortable routines, our pride.
So when God comes to pour his grace into our hearts, there's simply no room for it. So what does God do?
He brings out the spade of trouble and starts digging.
The pain of the trial is literally the act of excavation.
He breaks our comforts to empty us out, digging the reservoir of the heart deeper and wider so that it has the sheer volume to hold a massive ocean of his grace.
The architecture of the soul requires demolition before expansion.
It's so true. Spurgeon anchors this concept with a brilliant anecdote about walking with a humble plowman in the countryside.
Yeah, he notes that this uneducated plowman was so deeply taught in the things of God that he could have outpreached most college gentlemen.
And the plowman tells Spurgeon, "Depend upon it, my good brother. If you or I ever get 1 inch above the ground, we shall get just that inch too high."
1 inch above the ground is 1 inch too high.
What a profound theology of humility. The lower we lie, the nearer to the dirt we are crushed by our troubles, the more physically fit we are to receive comfort.
Because water always flows to the lowest point.
Exactly. God does not pour the water of his comfort onto the high peaks of human pride. He pours it into the lowest, most devastated valleys of human need.
That is the first mechanism. Trouble excavates the reservoir.
Okay, so what's the second?
The second reason consolations abound in suffering is that trouble naturally exercises our graces.
Okay.
When our graces, our faith, our hope, our endurance are forced to work, it inherently makes us healthier and more joyful.
Spurgeon uses geography and nature to explain this, right? The beautiful causality of it.
Yes, he talks about the Emerald Isle, Ireland.
He asks why the grass in Ireland is so vibrantly, impossibly green.
And it's not because it has endless days of uninterrupted sunshine.
Obviously not.
It's precisely because of the constant fogs, the dreary mists, and the heavy, relentless rain.
The gloomy weather is the engine of the verdure.
Right. Spurgeon says that wherever you find great fogs of trouble and mists of sorrow in a human life, you will find emerald green hearts, full of the beautiful, thriving foliage of the comfort and love of God.
He is pushing back against our assumption that sunshine is the only environment for growth.
He speaks to the believer who feels like their joy has died, who feels like God has abandoned them in a bitter winter.
He says, "Do not say the swallows are dead just because they flew away for the winter. They are migrating, and they will return."
Do not say the flowers are dead just because the winter has buried them under an ermine coat of snow.
Man, I love that phrase, an ermine coat of snow. It implies royalty and purpose, even in the freezing cold.
That snow, that bitter, agonizing season of silence is just God brewing summer for the believer.
What an incredible phrase. God is brewing summer.
When the sun finally comes out again, those dark clouds will drop the April showers that become the mothers of sweet Mayflowers.
So when God hides his face, it's not abandonment. He is exercising your faith, forcing you to wait in the dark, so that your capacity to love him is exponentially greater when the light returns.
The pain is productive.
Okay, so that's making room and exercising graces. But there is a third reason for this divine proportion.
And mathematically is the most convicting of all.
I agree. The third reason consolations abound in suffering is proximity.
Yeah.
This one is an absolute mirror held up to human nature, because it is universally true. When the barn is full, when the bank account is bursting, when our health is perfect, we somehow manage to live entirely without God.
We really do. We don't pray with any real desperation. We read the Bible as a hobby, not as a lifeline.
Spurgeon references the poetic Old Testament name for Israel, Jeshurun.
He points out that when Jeshurun waxed fat, he kicked against God. Wealth, comfort, and safety create a dangerous illusion of independence.
We begin to think we are the architects of our own peace.
But once God takes away your gourds, he dashes the cistern in pieces, blasts your crops, ruins your reputation, or brings the unthinkable grief of standing over an infant's coffin or a spouse's grave.
Then, and only then, does God become a God indeed.
Right. When you are stripped naked of all earthly support, penniless, helpless, and alone in the vast emptiness of space without a friend, that is when the most hearty, desperate, genuine prayer comes erupting from the depths of the soul.
Out of the depths will I cry unto thee, O God.
Suffering forces proximity.
Spurgeon uses a brilliant analogy here that honestly every parent can understand.
Oh, the lion.
Yes. Imagine a beautiful sunny day. A father and his young child are out for a walk. Because the environment is safe and pleasant, the child feels independent.
The child runs half a mile ahead of the father, chasing butterflies, totally ignoring the parent.
But suddenly, a roaring lion steps into the road. What happens to the child's independence?
It vanishes instantly.
Instantly. The child turns around, sprints back in sheer terror, and aggressively grabs the father's hand.
Trouble is the lion in the road.
Yes.
Its entire providential purpose is to drive us running back into the grip of our Father. If the road was always safe, we would wander off and be lost forever. The lion forces us back into communion.
Which radically changes how we view the weights in our life.
It does. We look at our troubles and call them dead weights dragging us down.
But Spurgeon flips the physics of it.
How so?
So it's like the bilge pumps of a wooden ship. The water rushing to the hull looks like it's going to sink the ship, but the mechanics of the pump use the very pressure of the water to fetch it out and keep the ship afloat.
I see.
Or think of a weighted pulley system. You look at a massive iron anvil chained to your ankle and you think, this weight is going to crush me to the floor. But if you run that chain up through the divine pulleys of grace, that massive weight pulling down on one side is the exact mechanism that lifts you up toward heaven on the other.
That is a fantastic synthesis of the mechanics. The weight is the lift.
It's all about how it's connected.
And it perfectly mirrors the final analogy Spurgeon uses to explain this proximity. The clogged horse.
Tell us about the clogged horse.
He describes a gentleman who owns a beautiful, highly prized horse. The horse is grazing in a lush pasture, but the owner has chained a heavy, cumbersome wooden clog to its foot.
Which seems cruel, right?
Right. A passerby asks, "Why would you cripple such a magnificent animal with that heavy clog?"
And what does the owner reply?
He says, "I would a great deal sooner clog him than lose him. He is given to leap hedges."
He is given to leap hedges. That is the human heart right there.
It is.
We are given to leap hedges. Our hearts relentlessly wander. We want to jump the fence of God's moral law and run off in the wild wilderness where we will ultimately starve or be destroyed by predators.
So God, in his infinite preserving mercy, binds us with afflictions.
He deliberately chains a heavy clog of sorrow to our foot to keep us tethered, to keep us near to him in the pasture.
Because he loves us too much to let us run fast. He would rather weigh us down with a lifetime of sorrow than let us stray and be eternally lost.
And that profound, preserving, intimate love brings us to the ultimate question.
Okay.
If the scales of consolation perfectly balance our suffering, if God is using pulleys and lions and clogs to keep us safe, who exactly is the source of this comfort?
To whom do we look when the clog is heavy?
Right. Spurgeon is emphatic that the honor does not go to the abstract philosophical concept of Christianity, nor to our own stoic resilience.
The comfort is located entirely in a person.
He paints a deeply intimate picture here. When you are suffering, it is not a theological formula that brings you peace. You don't recite a doctrinal statement to stop the bleeding.
It is a person. He says, imagine you are sick in your chamber, wasting away. Christ himself comes up the stairs, pulls up a chair, sits by your sick bed, and speaks sweet words to you.
It is the immediate, personal, felt presence of Jesus,
Yeah.
the companionship we talked about earlier.
And Spurgeon pushes that imagery to the absolute limit of human experience, to the very moment of death.
He explores the profound imagery of wading into the Jordan River, which represents the transition of death.
He says, imagine your blood is stagnating and freezing in your veins. You are stepping into the chilly, dark waters of mortality. You are standing terrified at the borders of the infinite black unknown.
But Christ puts his arms around you in the water and says, "Fear not, beloved, to die is to be blessed."
He says the waters of death aren't bitter in that moment. They are as sweet as nectar because they flow directly from the throne of God.
And even if you make your bed in Hades, in the realm of shades, Christ says, I will be with thee whithersoever thou goest.
That is the ultimate indestructible comfort.
And I love the linguistic play Spurgeon uses here to really drive this home. He looks at the poetic breakdown of the name Jesus.
Yes, he uses the Old English spelling, Jesu.
Right.
He breaks it down into syllables, I-E-S-U, meaning I ease you.
I ease you. It's a beautiful phonetic realization of his character.
Spurgeon tells the listener that if they do not know that matchless name, if they haven't been entranced by the sonnet contained in that one word, they have lost the sweetest melody of human existence.
Without the person of Jesus, without the specific, historical, resurrected one who says, I ease you, we are left miserable, uncomforted, and drowning in our afflictions.
That's the reality.
We've talked a lot about the grand theology of suffering, the mechanics of the reservoir, and the iron shutters of the heart.
A lot of high-level concepts.
But Spurgeon doesn't just preach a high-minded theological treatise and then walk out of Exeter Hall.
No, he wants to bring this right down to the ground for the person sitting in the pew.
He acts like the mythical Greek creature Briareus, the giant with 100 arms, reaching out into the crowd to grab every single type of person by the collar.
He has a direct, tailored application for every listener.
And we need to look at how this applies to you, the listener, right now.
He begins by addressing the anxious mind.
These are the people who aren't necessarily in the deep water of a crisis today, but they are terrified of tomorrow.
They are looking forward to future troubles, financial collapses, or health scares, and they are fretting over them in the present.
Spurgeon gives them the blunt, practical advice of the common people. Never cross a bridge till you get to it.
It sounds like a cliche, but the theology beneath it is actually profound. Why bring your troubles nearer than they are? Why invent phantom bridges?
He asks, what is the good of fretting? Why should the child chastise itself before the father even brings the rod?
God promises to give you grace for the trial when the actual trial arrives. He does not promise to give you grace for your imagination of the trial.
Ouch. If you sit down and groan over forebodings, you are just freezing yourself in a winter that hasn't even arrived.
Wait until the trouble actually comes, and then plunge into the stream and swim. But do not exhaust your strength fearing it before it is real.
It is a call to radical presence and trust in God's daily provision of manna. But then he turns to his second group.
What about the person who isn't imagining the trouble? The person who is currently drowning?
They've lost the job. They've lost the spouse. The biopsy came back positive. You didn't just fall in a puddle. You fell off the main deck into the freezing ocean. And you feel like you have a millstone around your neck and a mine of lead in your heart.
You are passed down exceedingly.
Spurgeon asks this drowning person, have you hung your harp upon the willows? Which is referencing the exiled Israelites in Babylon who couldn't bring themselves to sing.
And he says, I am glad you haven't broken it entirely. It is better to hang your joy up for a moment than to destroy it permanently.
But his command to the drowning person is completely counterintuitive to our survival instincts. He says, don't kick, don't struggle, lie upon the sea of trouble and float. Be still.
Be still and know that God is God.
Right. If you panic in the ocean, if you try to save yourself with all your kicking, thrashing, and frantic scheming, you will only exhaust yourself and sink deeper.
You have to lie back on the dark waters of God's sovereign providence. You have to float on the sovereignty of God and wait because the lifeboat is coming.
Christ is coming to your help to fetch you out of all your perplexities. Your frantic effort cannot save you. Only his intervention can.
And finally, he addresses the third group.
And this is the starkest, most uncompromising part of the entire text.
He speaks directly to the unregenerate, those who have no interest in this comfort because they do not know Christ.
Spurgeon draws a hard, unyielding line right down the middle of humanity. He says he doesn't care about the worldly distinctions we obsess over.
He doesn't care if you are aristocratic or democratic, rich or poor, educated or illiterate.
We are all made of the same flesh and blood. There is only one distinction that matters in the universe.
He says there are only two categories of humans. You're either a child of God or a child of the devil. You're either born again or you are dead in your trespasses and sins.
It is a moment of profound, terrifying solemnity. He strips away all the middle ground.
He tells the listeners that they must ask themselves this existential question, where am I? Is yon black tyrant with his fiery sword my king, or do I own Jehovah Jesus as my strength?
We aren't here to force an answer from you today, but you must let that question ring in your ears. Let your own soul speak and tell you which side of the line you fall on.
Because if you are on the wrong side of that line, the suffering of this world is just the beginning of your sorrows, and you have no divine scale of consolation to balance it.
Which brings all of this to a point of intense reflection. We've journeyed through the absolute certainty of suffering from the chiseling of God, the fury of hell, the ambush of the world, and the ticking time bomb of our own original sin.
We've seen the beautiful, complex mathematics of mercy where God uses the spade of trouble to dig out the reservoir of our hearts, how he clogs us so we won't leap the hedges to our destruction.
And we've seen that the ultimate comfort is the person of Jesus wading into the chilly waters of death to say, I ease you.
It fundamentally changes the paradigm of pain.
But as we wrap up, this entire framework raises a vital, provocative question for us today. Something for you to mull over long after this audio ends.
Absolutely.
In our modern era, we spend almost all our energy, our technology, our medicine, and our wealth trying to completely eradicate suffering.
We insulate ourselves from pain at all costs. We build massive padded walls to avoid ever encountering the lions in the road.
But based on Spurgeon's deep dive today, if we successfully eliminate all our trials, what are we actually doing to our souls?
Are we accidentally filling in our own reservoirs? By avoiding the spade of trouble, are we ensuring that our capacity for true divine joy remains the size of a miserable, shallow puddle?
Are we shrinking our own hearts by avoiding the very tools God uses to enlarge them? That is a thought that will stay with me for a long time. Thank you so much for joining us on Reformed Thinking.
We leave you to ponder the size of your reservoir, and we look forward to unpacking more truths with you next time.